So you join me down my local syndicate today. It's a 60-acre big pit based in the Midlands, and today we're going to talk about my casting technique. So casting a long way for me is all about technique, and today we're going to break that down into three things, and that's footwork, hand speed and transition of power. So now we're going to talk about technique. Now technique for me is a lot of small things that when done correctly create that one big thing to make that perfect cast. So I'm going to talk you through my style, what works well for me, and give you a few tips and tricks along the way. So my starting point is arms above my head, right arm ever so slightly bent, left arm ever so slightly left of the target. Now a lot of people think your left hand needs to be pointing at your target, but you do want to be ever so slightly left. If you have it too far to the right, it can cause you to cast high and right. And the actual direction of the cast is dictated by the right arm. So as you step forward and do your cast, you punch towards the target. So the first step for me will be to step forward with my left foot, punch with my right hand, and then pull with my left hand down to my lower left rib. Now the reason that I stand with my feet at a 45-degree angle is to incorporate my hips in the cast. It allows me to really punch through my hips and transition that power through to the rod. Right, so let's talk about how I hold the rod. Some people hold it with the first finger over the reel seat, some people through the middle. Me personally, I like to have my little finger underneath the reel seat and then get a good grip of the rod that way. Now the reason I have my hand higher up the blank is it's easier to compress the rod. If I was going for a full out cast and I wanted to cast as far as possible, I'd actually have my hand above the reel seat, which this would then make it easier to compress the rod because you're moving the pivot point up the rod. Now let's talk about where I hold the line. Now I have my line in the crease of my finger. Some people have it in between the crease and the tip. Me personally, I have it in the crease. I feel I get a better purchase and it doesn't slip off my finger. I just have a habit of letting go that little bit too early because of the power that goes into the cast. I want to make sure I let go at the right time. That's just what works well for me. So we talked briefly about my foot positioning and my hip movement. Now I need to talk about the upper body power and hand speed. So going from that position, the reason I keep my right arm bent a little bit is because I want that push-pull technique. Some people cast with their arms locked out and just pull with the left hand, which you can get a powerful cast, you can cast a long way, but you do get more power and more distance by having your arm a little bit bent and really punching through with that right hand as you pull with your left. So the way that would work for me is starting with your feet at 45, step forward, punch through nice and fast with your left hand and pull back to your left rib. So now I'm going to talk about where I finish the rod. But before I do that, one thing I do want to mention is as you plant that left foot and you step forward with your cast, it's important to have the rod parallel to the ground so you're not compressing the rod too late or too early. This gives you more power and more time in the cast. So now we'll talk about where I finish the cast. So your arms are up, you've done your step, your rod's parallel to the ground, you've punched and you've pulled. It's important that you stop at 45 degrees and let the rod recover, and this will give you the optimum position for the most distance. One other tip, after you've stopped the rod, if you have any form of crosswind, it's important that you follow the line through the tip. So if you cross to the right hand side, move the rod and look down your rod so the rod is coming out parallel to the tip. This will reduce the friction in the line. Some people hold the rod up in the air and wait for it to hit the clip. You'd be surprised how much distance you're actually losing from that line coming out at a sort of 90-degree angle, causing friction on the tip ring. So if you can, follow the tip, it will improve your distance. So we've gone through my technique and how I cast, but one thing I do suggest to a lot of people is to try and break down your cast and practice it step by step. It can be a lot for some people to try and process all those things to create that perfect cast. So what you want to try and do is maybe sometimes just practice on your footwork, do 10 casts doing the same thing with your feet. Sometimes practice with just pulling your left hand, sometimes practice stopping the rod, all those different things. If you can get good at each individual one of them, once they all come together, it does make that perfect cast. Right, now we've got the technique down, let's talk about equipment. So starting with the reel first, big pit, I tend to use them quite a lot. I prefer the line lay, I like the way the line comes off the spool. The bigger the spool, the less the line will drop on the cast, especially if you're casting a long way. If you have a shallower spool or a smaller spool, the line level will drop quite a lot, which will cause more friction on the top of the spool. So definitely a big pit reel, but most of the time it's not the reel that helps you cast a long way. Most reels these days do the job. The main thing for me is all about the rod. So it needs to be a 13-foot rod, nice stiff rod. Today we got 13-foot 3 3/4 Propel-D, 50mm ringing, which massively helps with reduced friction through the guides. Nice long handle, nice and lightweight and fast recovery. Just what I need for a long cast. Right, I think that's enough of me waffling on about how to cast. Time to give this rod a whack and do what I do best. Right, so now we're going to show you what we just spoke about. We're going to clip up at 50 wraps, which is 200 yards, and see if we can practice what we preach.